Hi, I'm Scott Willison with the Confluence Fly Shop in Bellingham, Washington. With spring season coming up here eventually, we're going to be getting out and fishing some of our lakes. I'm going to show you today how to tie a balance leech. It's a pretty innovative pattern designed to ride horizontally in the water versus vertically. Looks much more like a natural leech. You can fish it with or without an indicator. It's a really versatile fly and becoming very popular in our stillwater fisheries. So the first thing we're going to need to do is kind of build our balance chassis here. I've started with a Daiichi 4640, which is a jig style hook in a size 12. I've got that in the vise. The other thing I'm going to need here is a straight pin. I got a whole 250 pack of them over at Joann Fabrics for a couple bucks. And then I have a 7/64 inch black nickel tungsten bead. And we're going to start by putting that on the pin. Now, these beads have a wide end and they have a small end. And I'm going to put the wide end on first there so that some of that pin head gets kind of pushed into the bead a little bit there. And then I'm going to measure this to start out against the shank. Generally I'm going to want to extend this about 2 bead lengths past the eye of the hook there. So that's just going to give me kind of a preliminary point to cut this shank here. Don't use your scissors for that. Use a pair of dikes or wire cutters. I'm then going to prep this. I really want that bead to cinch up tight to the head of the pin. That's going to help me make sure I get this thing balanced. So I've just clipped that little clipped pin in the vise there, and I'm just building up a little layer of thread. Really focusing on that area up against the bead so I can lock that into place. And we'll test it. That's not going anywhere. We'll do just a couple of quick half hitches here. To keep our thread in place. And then we can trim that up and get a hook in there instead. I'm using a black 70 Denier Ultra thread for this. Pretty much any black thread's going to work pretty well. I use 6/0 uni thread a lot. So I've got a good thread base there. And then we'll go back and measure this again. So I think I'm about 2 bead lengths ahead. I'm not going to overdo it on the thread wraps. I'm going to keep this kind of light because if I need to go back and do some adjusting, I want to be able to push this in a little further or pull it out to get this fly to really sit horizontal. So I've got just a little piece of monofilament I'm going to put through the eye, and we'll take this out and see how well we balanced it. So notice at this point that it's running a little bit head down. That's okay, because one of the considerations you're going to have to make is when you put a little bit of a tail on this thing, it's going to want to balance it the other way. So if anything, when I test them out, I like them riding head down a little bit. And with a little bit of planning and a little bit of luck, this should all work itself out nicely. So we'll now go in and really reinforce this and make sure we've got this little balanced chassis on there solid. So I'll lock it in with some thread. I'm going to put a little bit of brush on Zap-A-Gap on here too. I don't want this thing coming apart after a few fish. One thing to take note of, which I've learned the hard way, is this little clip portion of the pin here can have some sharp edges, so be very cautious when you're winding your thread over it so you don't break your thread. Now for the tail, I'm going to put a little tuft of black rabbit. This is just a rabbit zonker strip. Just going to pull off a little bit here. I like to keep it kind of light. Clip that off the hide. If you go too heavy on your rabbit or too thick, it's not going to balance well. It's also just not going to move as well in the water. So my tail is approximately the length of the hook shank minus the little extension in the front. So I've got that into place. We're gonna add a little pizzazz with some electric blue Flashabou. Not a lot. I'm gonna just cut one strand that's a couple inches long here, and I'm gonna tie one strand on the near side of the hook, and then I'll fold it over the top and tie one on the far side of the hook. Trim that other one up about even with the tail. Last thing I like to do is just lift up that tail and take 2 or 3 wraps of thread underneath it. That props that up enough to where helps to prevent it from fouling around the hook. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to create a dubbing loop. Now you could certainly create a dubbing loop with your thread. I like to do a wire dubbing loop, both to get some additional segmentation and some additional flash. It's also a little stronger than the thread. I've got extra small red uni ultra wire, and I cut a piece that's several inches long. I'm just going to kind of even up the ends of it here, and we'll tie that down along the shank of the hook and all the way back to the tail. At this point, I'll go ahead and reposition my thread at the bead at the front there. Now this extra small wire sometimes can be kind of brittle when you start twisting it, so you want to be careful not to twist it too much. For the body on the balance leech, you can use all kinds of things. I like Mohair Plus dubbing, products like the trilobal dubbing, any kind of longer dubbing. There's some really cool color blends out there with the Senyo's Fusion dub. For this one, I'm going to use the Midnight color. It's predominantly black with some blue and copper highlights. And I'm going to pull out a little bit here. You can see I don't have that much dubbing. Less is more when you're doing these. I'm just going to kind of spread that out. Biggest mistake I see people make tying these types of things is using way too much dubbing. We'll go ahead and insert that into our dubbing loop, and then we'll spin that up lightly. With the wire, you don't really need to spin it quite as much as you would with the thread. I'm just going to real lightly tease that out here with the dubbing brush. We'll make it even better a little later, and then we're just going to wind this up to our bead. wrap over it. And then for that little bit of wire, we'll just rock that back and forth until it breaks. Make sure we've got that locked into place, and so that bead's not going to push back. And then to finish this fly, I don't want to use a head cement or something that I'm going to get all in my nicely dubbed body. So we'll just brush a little bit of brush on Zap-A-Gap on our thread. Alright, and then with that on there, we'll go ahead and whip finish. And trim our thread. And then we're just going to rough up this body a little bit better so it really moves in the water. Just going to use the end of my whip finishing tool to kind of pick out some of the loose fibers here. Could certainly use a bodkin or any other pointy end to do this. I'm not getting too aggressive because I don't want to hook that wire and pull it out there, but just kind of separating those fibers. And then we'll take coarse dubbing brush and just kind of brush that out to our liking, and then we're done. One other step you can take to really make these soft and supple and get a ton of movement out of them in the water is boil some water, put the fly on a piece of monofilament, dip it in the boiling water just for a few seconds, and then really train those fibers back, and that tends to soften everything up and move a little bit better. We'll take a look at our balance here with the finished fly, and did we do it? That is pretty horizontal there. So you can see what I mean about getting it going forward, because all of this is going to level it out a little bit better. So wonderful fly. Tie these in a variety of different colors. This is a deadly weapon on your favorite local lake. So thank you for watching. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next month.